The silence in Nia's room was deafening. The soft glow of the nightlight cast shadows across the walls, but it couldn't chase away the deep loneliness that had settled in her chest. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, her father's old phone was cradled in her hands, cold and heavy with the weight of memories she could no longer bear to face. 6 months had passed since her world was torn apart. 6 months since the last time she saw her father, heard his laugh, felt his reassuring presence beside her. 6 months of aching emptiness. The house felt quieter now. The once familiar hum of morning routines, the sound of her father's footsteps as he moved around, all gone. And her mother, strong as always, kept up the illusion that everything was fine. But Nia knew. She saw the cracks in her mother's eyes, the same quiet sadness that lingered in her own heart. Tonight, the grief hit her harder than ever before. She couldn't stop thinking about her father. His absence had become an unbearable ache that no amount of time could fill. Every corner of the house seemed to hold a memory. His laughter while making breakfast, the way his hands held her close during storms, how he would tell her that no matter what, she was never alone. And now she was alone. Her small fingers traced the screen of his phone, the only piece of him left in her life. The number was still saved. It had been there all this time, untouched, waiting like a lifeline to something she couldn't reach. The message, a message she never thought she'd send, formed on her lips before she could stop it. A message she didn't even know she needed to say, but had to. "I miss you so much, Daddy," she whispered through trembling lips. Her voice cracked, breaking with the weight of the words. "I wish you could come back." She paused, her finger hovering above the screen. Her heart was racing and the room felt colder, like the walls themselves were closing in. She knew it was hopeless, but there was something about his old number, something about that tiny sliver of connection that made her believe, just for a moment, that he could somehow hear her. Without another thought, she pressed send. The message was out there now, into the void. She sat back, waiting, not knowing why. But the silence that followed felt just as heavy as before. There would be no response, no miracle. It was just another way of saying goodbye. A week passed, and the quiet emptiness that had filled Nia's life since her father's death seemed even more pronounced. The message had stayed unanswered, like all the others she had whispered into the wind. But tonight was different. She had just finished another sleepless night, staring at old photos of her dad when her phone suddenly buzzed. Her heart skipped. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Could it be? Did someone finally reply? She unlocked the screen, her fingers trembling with anticipation, only to find that it wasn't the voice she longed to hear. Instead, the message read, "I'm not your dad, but I'm here for you." Nia froze. A strange man's voice echoed in her head as she reread the message. It wasn't the voice she expected, not the comforting sound of her father's warm laugh, or the gentle whispers of a father telling his daughter everything would be okay. This was something else, something foreign. The words felt out of place, like a strange hand reaching into her grief, offering comfort she wasn't sure she wanted. She stared at the screen, confused, then cautiously clicked the voice note that had come with the reply. The voice on the other end was deep, reassuring, but with an unfamiliar edge. "I'm sorry, I know this is probably a mistake, but your message, I couldn't just ignore it. I don't know if I can help, but I want to listen." The warmth in his voice, though, was undeniable. It wasn't her father, but something about his tone made Nia pause. There was a strange kind of understanding, a sadness that echoed in his words, making her feel like maybe, just maybe, he could help her with the ache she was feeling. That night, as Nia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, 1,000 questions raced through her mind. Who was this man? How had he ended up receiving her father's old number? Why would he respond to someone like her, a grieving child reaching out to the echoes of a lost connection? Her fingers hovered over the screen, as if she were waiting for another message to appear, one that would tell her more. But the phone remained still, and as the quiet settled back in, Nia's mind wandered. She didn't expect much from this man. He wasn't her father, and nothing would ever fill the hole he left. But there was something about his message that intrigued her, Something in the way he seemed to understand the pain in her voice. Something that tugged at a part of her heart she didn't even know was still open. Days passed, and Nia began replying to him, slowly at first, unsure of herself, unsure of the strange man on the other end. But he kept reaching back, kept offering words of comfort, words that Nia wasn't sure she could even believe. She had no idea then that this small exchange, this simple reply, would spiral into a conversation that neither of them expected, one that would uncover hidden truths, shared grief, and emotional healing. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story and family. If you are already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Because tomorrow I will be giving you yet another story just as interesting as this one, and you do not want to miss it. Before this story unfolds, take a moment and ask yourself, what would you do if the world you thought you knew was turned upside down by a single act of kindness? Every choice in life has its consequences, and sometimes it only takes one moment to change everything. If you're ready to witness a story that will tug at your heart and challenge everything you believe, then tag along with us. 3 days earlier, across the city, in a penthouse office bathed in the glow of skyscrapers, Billy Murphy sat alone, buried in numbers. At 56, he had everything: wealth, power, influence. But his life, full of endless meetings, deals, and boardroom battles, was empty. Despite all that he had, something was missing. He had never been able to give much of his heart to anything, or anyone. His thoughts were too often consumed by the next big deal or the growing demands of his empire. Billy's life had always been about control. It had to be. In a world where he was revered as the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company, vulnerability wasn't a luxury he could afford. He had learned early on that showing weakness meant risking everything. So he built walls around his heart, a fortress made of work and success, of meetings and acquisitions, of power and solitude. It was a life that brought admiration and respect, but no love. The message that appeared on his phone that night was not part of his carefully curated world. It was a voice note, sent by a little girl named Nia. Billy raised an eyebrow as he glanced at the name. Nia. His thumb hovered over the play button. He had received dozens of voice notes in his life, but they were usually from colleagues or business partners, discussing deals or future strategies. Not from children, not like this. He hesitated. What was it about this message that felt different? With a flick of his finger, he pressed play. At first, Billy didn't understand what he was hearing. The voice was small, fragile, and full of raw emotion. A crack in the air that was almost too real to process. I miss you so much, Daddy. I wish you could come back. He frowned. Daddy? The message didn't make sense. Why would a little girl send such an emotional plea to a random number? Confusion washed over him, followed by a strange, unsettling feeling. He glanced at his phone again. His hand hovered over the screen. He knew the message wasn't for him. It must have been sent to the wrong number. But there was something about her voice, the pain that seeped through the words, that tugged at him. Billy had spent decades constructing a life that was untouchable, so carefully insulated from real emotion that the deepest feelings he had ever allowed himself were reserved for the wins in his business. But this was something else. As he listened again, the message began to sink in. He felt a strange knot tighten in his chest. It was the kind of raw grief that only a child could carry, unfiltered, unshielded by the complexities of adulthood. I wish you could come back. The words played over and over in his head, almost like a plea for comfort, and yet there was nothing Billy could do. He wasn't her father, and yet, the truth was, Billy was no stranger to loss. His mind drifted back to his own childhood, to his own fractured relationship with his father, who had been absent for much of his life. There had been times when Billy had longed to hear his father's voice, to feel that unshakable bond that children shared with their parents. But instead, his father had been a figure far removed from his life, a man who believed in duty above all else, a man who, despite his position and his wealth, had never once shown affection to his son. Billy had carried that lack of connection with him throughout his life, and it had shaped him in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. His relationship with his own children, if he could even call it that, had been transactional. When his marriage had fallen apart, Billy had focused on his company even more. His children, too, had become just another part of the business. They'll understand when they're older, he would tell himself. But the truth was, there had never been any real emotional depth, not with his father and not with his own kids. The voice note from Nia had peeled back the layers of his hardened exterior. "I miss you so much. Daddy, I wish you could come back," her plea echoed in his mind. Billy had never allowed himself to grieve like that, to miss something as deeply as she missed her father. It was foreign to him. He needed to reply. Billy wasn't a man who responded to every message, let alone one from a child he didn't know. But there was something about Nia's voice, something that cracked open a door he had long ago sealed shut. It was as though, in her sadness, she had awakened a part of him that had been dormant for years. Without thinking, he typed out a message. "Hey, Nia, I'm not your dad, but I'm here for you. I'm so sorry you're feeling like this." It wasn't much. He wasn't sure what else to say. He wasn't exactly known for comforting people. He was Billy Murphy, the CEO, the man who built a tech empire from the ground up. But tonight, he wasn't the CEO. He was just a man staring at a phone screen, uncertain of what he was supposed to do. He hit send. Billy sat back, in his chair, his mind racing. He didn't expect a reply. And if she did respond, what would he say next? What did a billionaire, a man who had built his life around wealth and power, know about comforting a grieving child? He had nothing to offer her. But something about this felt different. The next day, Billy couldn't shake the nagging feeling that had settled deep inside him. The office, the meetings, the constant noise of his life. It all felt muffled somehow. Even his assistant's voice, asking him about the latest tech launch, seemed distant and irrelevant. His mind kept returning to that voice note, to the pain that had crept into his own chest, a pain he hadn't acknowledged in years. And when he received another message from Nia, his heart skipped a beat. "Thank you for listening," she had written. "I miss him so much. I wish I could hear him say everything is going to be okay. I keep thinking if I send a message, maybe I'll hear his voice again." Billy's fingers hovered over the screen as he read her words. He felt a tug in his chest again, this time stronger. He had no words to explain how it felt to lose a parent, to miss them with such intensity. But somehow, Nia's grief was starting to feel like his own. He paused before replying. "I know it hurts. I really do. But remember, even though you can't hear his voice, you can carry his love with you. That's something no one can ever take away." Billy wasn't sure why he was saying these things, why he felt compelled to reply with such words. He wasn't the one who could heal her pain, but he couldn't stop himself from trying. There was a part of him that, for the first time in a long time, wanted to connect with another human being. Not as a CEO, not as a businessman, but just as a person who could listen, who could offer some semblance of understanding. It was odd, really, how quickly his thoughts about Nia had moved beyond just a grieving little girl. He had never met her, never seen her face, but somehow her pain had reached through the screen and found a crack in his own walls. A crack he hadn't even known was there. In the quiet moments that followed, Billy realized something. His wealth, his empire, had never once given him this kind of connection. He had spent so many years focused on building something that could never truly fill the emptiness inside him. But here with Nia, there was something different, something he didn't understand yet, but something that felt important. As he hit send on the message, he realized that he wasn't just trying to comfort a young girl. He was trying to comfort himself. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the past few minutes. The connection with Nia had become more than just a fleeting distraction. It had become something real, something that might just change both of their lives forever. And as the night fell over the city, Billy Murphy, the billionaire, sat in his office, his heart a little less heavy, his mind a little less closed off. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. The next few days unfolded in a haze of quiet messages between Billy and Nia. Billy, once consumed by business deals and the constant hum of corporate life, found his mind returning time and again to the little girl and her words. Every message from Nia felt like a call, a plea for connection in a world that had become distant and cold for both of them. Despite their differences, age, background, experience, their shared grief was something that bound them together in a way Billy never expected. Nia, on the other hand, was still hesitant. She wasn't used to reaching out, especially not to a stranger. But the more Billy responded, the more she began to open up, cautiously at first. His kindness, his understanding, felt safe, even if he was a complete stranger. She had never shared so much with anyone before, and yet, with him, it was different. It was as though her father's presence, the one thing she missed most, lived in his words. It started with small things. Nia sharing the little memories she clung to of her father, how he used to carry her on his shoulders, his deep laugh that filled their home, the way he always knew how to make her feel special. The conversations, despite their distance, had an intimacy that felt so real. Each word felt like a lifeline. He used to tell me stories, Nia typed one evening, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the phone in her small hands. He made everything sound so magical. Like when I had a bad day at school, he'd say that every little thing I did was important, that it mattered. And when I was sad, he'd just hug me, and everything felt okay again. Billy read her words, the ache in his chest deepening. His own father had never spoken to him like that. For Billy, affection was something that was taught, not shown. It was the exchange of success, of expectations. His father's love had been conditional, based on what Billy could accomplish. He had never experienced what Nia spoke of, the pure, unconditional bond that a father could have with his child. And for the first time, he found himself mourning a loss he hadn't realized was his to mourn. His mind wandered back to his own father. The man who had built the same empire Billy now controlled, who had left him with wealth and power, but not love. He hadn't realized until now just how emotionally starved he had become. The messages between them continued, and gradually, Nia opened up more. She spoke of how she missed her father's advice, the way he always made her feel like she was capable of anything. She shared the pain of feeling incomplete, of having a part of her life missing. Billy's heart cracked each time he read her words. The emptiness that Nia described was all too familiar to him. In his world of boardrooms and high-stakes deals, he had never been able to connect in the way she described. Never able to form a bond that could withstand the test of time. Billy's life had been full of accomplishments, but devoid of the one thing that Nia seemed to have had in abundance. Love, a genuine, nurturing connection, and that realization gnawed at him. He had worked so hard for his empire, chasing after success as though it was the only thing that mattered. But now, with Nia's words ringing in his ears, he began to question everything he had built. One evening, after reading yet another message from Nia, Billy set his phone down and leaned back in his chair. His office, filled with expensive furniture and sleek technology, suddenly felt stifling, too much of a reminder of the life he had chosen for himself. The emptiness that had always been there seemed to grow larger, deeper. He had spent years building this empire, piece by piece, always focusing on the next milestone, the next acquisition. But when was the last time he'd truly felt something? When was the last time he'd experienced a moment of connection that wasn't transactional? Billy, you ever miss your dad? Nia's message arrived, the question so innocent and raw that it sent a pang through his chest. Yeah, Billy replied slowly. I think I do. It's hard to miss someone who never really showed you much affection, though. Billy paused before sending it, knowing that his admission was a crack in the wall he had so carefully built around himself. He had always prided himself on being the CEO who didn't let emotions interfere with business. But here, in this conversation, he found himself unable to hide behind that persona. I don't remember him ever telling me I was important, he continued, his fingers hesitant on the screen. Not like how you remember your dad, but I guess I've always longed for that. He didn't know why he was telling her this. This little girl who had already been through so much, she didn't deserve to carry the weight of his regrets, his sadness. But something about her openness, her vulnerability, made him feel like he could be real with her, just for a moment. Nia didn't respond right away. For a long time, Billy sat in the silence, feeling vulnerable in a way he had never experienced before. The glow of the city lights outside his office window seemed distant now, as though they were no longer enough to light the void within him. By the way, if this story hits home for you, drop a comment. I'd really love to know what you would have done in his place. Now, where were we? Finally, Nia's message came through. I think I'd like to have a dad like you. One who works hard for people. Even if he didn't say he loves you, he probably does, right? Billy stared at the screen, the words landing heavy in his chest. The simple, innocent belief in the goodness of others, of him, was something Billy had long forgotten. And here, in this brief moment of vulnerability, Nia had reminded him of it. I think he probably did, Billy typed back, his heart heavier than before. But maybe I didn't know how to accept it. There was another long pause. Nia's response was slower this time, more thoughtful. It's okay, she wrote. Sometimes people don't know how to show love. Maybe they just need help figuring it out. Billy felt a lump in his throat. She was only a child, yet her words had the power to shift something inside him. He hadn't realized how much he had missed the simplest kind of human connection, the kind where people didn't need to hide behind walls of power and control, where they could just be honest, vulnerable. That night, as he sat in his office, staring out at the bright lights of the city below, Billy realized that he had begun to look forward to Nia's messages. In the middle of his hectic world, her words were like a lifeline, a reminder of what truly mattered. As his exchanges with her continued, Billy found himself wanting to be a better man, not just for her, but for himself. Nia had no idea how much she had already changed him. Each message from her was a window into a life he hadn't allowed himself to see. One where love wasn't just a business transaction, but something real, something that could fill the emptiness. And for the first time in a long time, Billy was starting to see a future that wasn't just about success and wealth, but about real human connection. Maybe it wasn't too late to change after all. Maybe there was more to life than just the deals, the acquisitions, and the power. And as he prepared to reply to Nia, he realized that the words he was about to send wouldn't just be for her. They were for him too. The soft ping of her phone was a welcome distraction. Nia sat on the edge of her bed, the light from her nightstand lamp casting a warm glow on her face. The days had been long since her father passed, the silence in the house almost suffocating at times. But as she reached for the phone, she felt a glimmer of relief. Her conversations with Billy had become a lifeline, a thread to something she hadn't realized she was missing, a connection. This time, it wasn't just a simple message. Billy's words seemed heavier, more thoughtful than usual. I knew your father, Billy wrote, the message hanging between them like an unexpected weight. Nia froze. Her fingers hovered over the phone screen, unsure whether to keep reading or to stop altogether. She blinked, her heart racing slightly, then reread the message. He was one of the first people to believe in me when I was starting out in my career. He mentored me, helped me see things differently. You know, your father, he had a way of making everyone around him feel like they mattered. Nia felt the breath catch in her throat. She hadn't expected this. Billy, the man who had taken time out of his life to console her over the loss of her dad, had a history with him, a history that was bigger, more intertwined with her father's life than she could have ever imagined. What do you mean? She typed back, her fingers trembling slightly. He was my mentor. In the early days, when I was struggling to get my company off the ground, your dad showed me what it meant to fight for something that mattered. He taught me a lot about patience and the importance of people over numbers. The words were like a bombshell, hitting her chest with a force she wasn't prepared for. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the revelation. Her father had always been her rock, the one constant in her world. But this side of him, the part that had influenced someone as powerful and successful as Billy, was something she had never known. Nia's father had been a man of principles, someone who valued the connections he made with others. She always thought of him as a loving father, a strong figure who provided for their family and showered her with affection. But now, in this moment, she realized there had been a whole other world to him, one that she had never seen. He had been more than just her father. He had been a mentor, a guide, someone whose wisdom had shaped the trajectory of a man like Billy Murphy. Nia didn't know how to feel. She wanted to be proud of her father, but the weight of this new discovery made her feel small and lost. He had kept so much from her, so much of his life, of his world. She'd never known that her father had been so deeply involved in the creation of someone else's empire, and to hear Billy speak about him with such reverence made her question everything she thought she knew. "I had no idea," Naya typed, trying to make sense of it all. "He never told me he helped you." Billy's reply was thoughtful, almost regretful. "He didn't like to talk about it. Your dad was humble, more interested in helping others succeed than taking credit for his role. That's the kind of man he was." Nia sat back, processing his words. She didn't know if she should feel honored or betrayed. Her father had never mentioned any of this. He'd always downplayed his own achievements, always focused on making sure she was happy, that she was okay. She'd never known the depth of his influence, the way he had shaped Billy's life, the way he had played a part in building the empire Billy now controlled. A mix of admiration and confusion swirled within her. On one hand, she was proud that her father had been so integral in shaping someone as successful as Billy. Proud that his legacy wasn't just in her memories, but in the very foundation of someone else's life. On the other hand, she couldn't help but feel conflicted. She had always known him as Dad, the loving, protective father. But now, with this new revelation, she was forced to reckon with the fact that he had been so much more than that. Someone who had made waves in the world long before she even knew it. "Why didn't he ever tell me about this?" Nia sent, her voice echoing in her mind. "Why didn't he tell me how important he was to you?" There was a pause before Billy responded, and when he did, his message felt weighty, as though he was choosing his words carefully, because that wasn't what mattered to him. To him, what mattered was you. He didn't want to burden you with his history. He wanted you to know him as your father, not just as someone who helped others succeed. He wanted you to feel loved, not weighed down by the world he carried. Nia's eyes welled up with tears. She had always known her father had been a good man, but hearing Billy speak of him with such tenderness, with such respect, brought an entirely new dimension to the man she thought she knew so well. "I miss him so much," she typed, feeling the tears trickle down her cheeks. "I wish I knew this side of him. I wish I could have asked him about his life before me." Billy didn't respond immediately. She could almost feel the weight of his silence, the shared understanding between them. Then his message arrived, quiet and comforting. "He gave you the best of him, Naya. He made sure you knew how much you mattered. That's something a lot of people don't get to experience. You're lucky." But as Nia read his words, she couldn't shake the feeling of being left in the dark. Her father had kept his world a secret from her. He had always been so protective, so careful to shield her from the complexities of life. But now, in the wake of this discovery, she wondered what else he had hidden from her, what other parts of his life were locked away, hidden behind his love for her. For the first time, Nia saw her father as a multifaceted man, someone who had navigated the world in ways she never could have imagined. The realization struck her like a wave. Her father had been a key player in the world, but all she had known was his role in her life as Dad. Now that title felt too simple, too narrow. Naya leaned back on her bed, her phone still clutched in her hands. The weight of the discovery, of the secrets that had been kept from her, felt like a burden she wasn't sure she was ready to carry. But at the same time, there was a sense of pride growing within her. Her father had been more than just a father. He had been a force, someone who had left an indelible mark on the world, a world she never knew. Her thoughts turned back to Billy. His openness, his willingness to share this part of her father's life with her, was both a gift and a challenge. He had become someone she could confide in, someone who understood the weight of her grief in ways no one else could. But with this new knowledge came new questions, new uncertainties. Was she ready to confront the full truth about her father, about the man he had been before he was just Dad to her? And was she ready to face the consequences of these revelations? The bond she shared with Billy had grown deeper with each conversation, and now, with the discovery of her father's involvement in his rise to power, she realized that this connection, unexpected as it was, had already changed her. She wasn't just learning about her father's past. She was learning about herself, about the power of connection, and about how love could take many forms. But the question remained, could she reconcile the man she had always known with the man Billy had known? Her phone pinged once more, breaking her reverie. "I'm here for you, Nia, whenever you need someone." The simple words felt like a promise, a lifeline that she had come to rely on more than she expected. And for the first time in a long while, Nia allowed herself to believe that, in this strange and complicated world, she wasn't alone. Nia didn't expect to feel so connected to Billy. At first, it was just a series of messages back and forth, a brief exchange of condolences, a few comforting words here and there. But as the days passed, something deeper began to take root. They were two people from vastly different worlds, yet the connection between them felt undeniable. Her grief for her father had brought her into contact with Billy, and in the silence of their shared pain, something unexpected had formed. She began to notice it, the small shifts in Billy's words. It was in the subtle pauses, the way he sometimes lingered on a sentence, as though he was choosing his next words carefully. And then there were the messages that didn't quite make sense at first glance. The way he'd sometimes end a conversation with something like, "I don't know why I'm telling you all of this, Nia," or, "You probably don't want to hear about my life right now." At first, Nia thought little of it. But as their conversations grew, she began to see something in Billy's words that she couldn't ignore. There was a weight behind them, something raw and vulnerable. Billy, for all his wealth and power, was not as invincible as he seemed. He was lonely, searching for something, anything, that could fill the emptiness that had settled in his chest. It wasn't long before Nia, still mourning her father, noticed that the messages from Billy were becoming more frequent. They talked about all sorts of things, memories of her father, things she remembered him saying, and even some of the struggles she was still facing. But Nia also found herself asking Billy questions about his life, his work, and most of all, his feelings. And every time she did, the walls he had built around himself would seem to crack just a little more. One night, as Nia stared at her phone, the dim light from her desk lamp flickering in the darkness, Billy sent her a message that was different from all the others. It was late, almost midnight, but she knew that if she didn't respond now, she wouldn't be able to sleep. "Nia, I've been thinking, you probably think I have everything figured out. I don't." Billy's words felt heavier than usual. There was something in the bluntness of them that gave Nia pause. He had never really opened up like this before. She leaned in, her thumb hovering over the keys, before she responded. "I don't know what you mean. You've got everything, right? You have a big company. You've built something successful." Billy's reply came swiftly, and there was a hint of something in his tone that made Nia's heart ache. "It's not about success, Nia. It's not about money or power or any of the things I've spent my life chasing. I have everything, but none of it fills the space inside me that's been empty for years." Nia stared at the words. $1 billion empire, and still, Billy was speaking about something far more important, the loneliness that came with it. It was a sobering realization that made her heart heavy, as though she could feel the emptiness inside him from the other side of the screen. She had heard of the kind of loneliness that success could breed, but it wasn't until now, talking to Billy, that she understood just how deep it ran. "I don't think you're alone," she typed carefully, her fingers moving slowly, unsure of how to respond to someone so distant, so removed from her own life. "You've got your work, and I'm here. I'm always here to listen." The words she had typed felt small, compared to the depth of what Billy had shared, but she meant them. She had never really thought about how much her father's passing had left a void in her. But talking to Billy, she started to see the similarities. They both had these enormous gaps in their lives, and they were trying to fill them with different things. Billy's reply was quiet, almost unsure, and it came long after she had sent her message. "I never thought someone like you would understand. I've spent my whole life avoiding the things that really matter: family, love, connection. I've been chasing success, and all it's done is isolate me." Nia felt the weight of his words. She had never seen someone so successful express such profound loneliness. Here she was, an 11-year-old girl who had barely begun to understand the complexities of life. Yet in this moment, she was the one who saw through Billy's emotional wall. She had lost her father, the one person who had made her feel safe and loved, and now she was offering that same compassion to Billy, a man she had never met, but who had been so generous with his own heart. "I know what it's like to feel lost," Nia typed, the words coming easier now, almost as if she had known this moment was coming. I know what it feels like to have someone you love taken away and not know how to keep going, but you don't have to do it alone, Billy. I don't think anyone can. There was a long pause before he replied, and when he did, his message was simple, yet profound. Thank you, Naya. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. In that moment, Naya understood something important about herself, about how the compassion she had for Billy was not just a form of kindness, but a healing force. Her father had taught her to love deeply, to care fiercely, and now, in the absence of her father, she was passing that love on to someone else. Billy's loneliness, his empty pursuit of success, was something she could help him with. She didn't know how to fix it, how to fill the void inside him, but she knew that she could offer him something she hadn't expected, a connection, a friendship, a place where he could be seen and heard without any of the pretense that his wealth demanded. Hey, are you enjoying this story so far? If you are, hit that like button. It lets me know to keep making more like this. All right, back to it. Over the next few days, their conversations became more personal, more vulnerable. Nia, despite her young age, shared her father's wisdom, things he had taught her when she was small, things that now felt like pieces of a puzzle she had to put together to understand who he was, who she was becoming. Billy listened, but he also shared his own stories of failure and regret, of moments he wished he could change. Nia couldn't explain it, but she felt something shifting inside Billy. Every conversation seemed to peel back layers of his carefully constructed walls. He wasn't just the billionaire CEO of a tech empire anymore. He was a man who, despite his vast fortune, had been haunted by the lack of love in his life. He had everything, but had spent too much time avoiding the very things that would have made his life whole. Now, through their exchanges, he was beginning to realize just how much he had been missing. One evening, as the sky outside her bedroom window turned deep purple, Nia typed a message that, for the first time, made her pause before sending. I don't think I can fix everything for you, Billy. I can't bring my dad back, and I can't take away your loneliness, but I can be here for you. We can be here for each other, even if it's just through messages. She didn't know what Billy's response would be. It had been a long journey from their first awkward exchange to now, and she wasn't sure how to navigate this uncharted territory between them. The reply came quickly. I don't need you to fix anything, Nia. You've already done more than enough. You've reminded me what it's like to care about something, someone, other than myself. You've made me realize how much I've been missing. Nia closed her eyes, letting the weight of his words settle in her heart. She had helped Billy confront the emptiness that had plagued him for so long, just by showing him a little bit of love. And in turn, he had helped her process her own grief. It was a bond, an unexpected one, but one that had grown stronger with each exchange. Billy was starting to understand, slowly, that the things he said mattered the most. Love, connection, the people we hold close, could never be measured in wealth or success. They were the things that gave life meaning, and with each conversation, Nia was teaching him just that. She had become more than just a grieving child looking for solace. She had become a mirror, showing Billy his own pain and slowly his own healing. And for the first time in a long time, Billy felt like maybe he wasn't as alone as he had thought. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Billy's penthouse, casting long shadows across the sleek, minimalist furniture. The view of the city below, the sprawl of glass and steel, felt almost cold today. For the first time in years, Billy found himself standing still in the middle of his office, his hands resting on the polished edge of the desk. The hum of his phone was almost imperceptible against the backdrop of the city's pulse, but it was enough to pull him back from the silence he'd found himself wrapped in. He glanced at the screen. Naya's name. It had become a daily ritual now. Their conversations had stretched beyond the expected, "I'm sorry for your loss," and "I'm here for you" responses. Instead, they had drifted towards something deeper, a shared vulnerability that neither of them had expected to find. Billy had tried to deny it at first, the connection that was growing between them, but every message she sent made it harder to ignore. Nia had become something more than just a grieving child to him. She had become a lifeline, a reminder of what it was like to care about something beyond just numbers and deadlines, Something real, something human. Billy tapped the screen, opening the message. Billy, you seem like you've been holding a lot in. It's okay if you want to talk about it. I'm here. He stared at the words, feeling the weight of them. She was right, of course. He had been holding things in, so much that it had created a wall around him that no amount of success or wealth could break down. But he had never allowed himself the luxury of vulnerability before. He had spent his life building a fortress of business deals, expensive dinners, and power meetings. But every time he looked into that fortress, he saw only an empty room. The loneliness that had been a constant companion in his life seemed louder now. It had been quiet for so long, creeping up on him from behind closed doors. But now, standing in the bright light of morning, it was impossible to ignore. Naya, with her innocence and warmth, had cracked something inside him. He had tried to keep it together, to play the part of the billionaire CEO who had everything under control, but she had seen through it all. She had seen the man beneath the facade, the man who had spent too many years avoiding what mattered most. He sat down at his desk, fingers hovering over the keys, unsure of how to begin. His thumb moved slowly across the screen as he began typing. You're right, I've been holding a lot in, Nia. And it's not easy to say this, but I've been feeling more alive when I talk to you than I have in years. There was a long pause before he hit send. The vulnerability of that sentence was unsettling. For so long, he had shielded himself from this kind of emotional exposure, but with Nia, it felt different. She wasn't just a stranger behind a screen. She had become someone he could trust, someone who had reached into the deepest parts of him, places he had long forgotten. The reply came almost instantly. I'm glad I could help, Billy. Sometimes it's just about talking to someone who listens, you know? I don't think you've had a chance to talk to someone like that in a while. Billy leaned back in his chair, letting her words sink in. She was right. He hadn't had someone like that in years. His world was full of people, employees, clients, competitors, but they were all interested in one thing, his wealth. They wanted something from him, and he had become so accustomed to that, to giving and receiving based on power and transactions, that the concept of simply being heard without any agenda was foreign to him. And yet, with Nia, it felt like there were no strings attached, no expectations. She was a child, but somehow she had become the one person who could make him feel seen, and that thought struck him harder than he expected. What had he been doing all these years? Building an empire, chasing success. But for what? His wealth had given him a life of comfort, of luxury, of respect, but it had not given him the one thing he had craved the most, human connection. Naya, with her rawness and simplicity, had begun to show him the value of the things he had long neglected: family, love, real conversation. Billy, I know you don't want to hear this, Nia's message continued, but I think you've spent too much time focusing on building your company and not enough time focusing on building your life, your relationships. I think you've missed out on some important things. Billy's heart sank as he read her words. Was she right? Had he really missed out on what mattered most? He had spent decades climbing to the top of the corporate ladder, but in the process, he had sacrificed everything that made life worth living: love, friendship, the people who made him feel like he mattered beyond his bank account. His mind drifted back to a memory he had long buried. The last time he had seen his mother. It was years ago, before she passed, when he had been too busy to visit her in the hospital. He had convinced himself that work was more important, that success was more important. But now, sitting alone in his penthouse, he realized how wrong he had been. Billy tapped out a response, feeling the weight of it before he even hit send. I don't know how I missed it, Nia. I guess I thought that if I just kept working hard enough, everything else would fall into place, but it hasn't. I've been so focused on my career that I've ignored the one thing that really matters: the people I love. He stared at the message for a moment, then hit send. It felt like a confession, like he was admitting his failures to someone who was too young to understand the complexities of life. But with Nia, he didn't feel like he needed to hide. She understood loss, understood pain, maybe more than anyone else he had ever known. Nia's reply came through quickly, and her words were exactly what he needed to hear. It's not too late, Billy. You can still change things. You can still make things right. But you have to start by being real with yourself. Don't be afraid to admit that you need something more than just business. Billy closed his eyes for a moment, taking in her words. There was wisdom in her simple messages, wisdom that he had spent years ignoring. Maybe she was right. Maybe it wasn't too late to make a change. Maybe the real power didn't come from the number of zeros in his bank account, but from the relationships he had, and the ones he still could build. As the night wore on, Billy couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted within him. His empire, his fortune, none of it seemed to matter as much anymore. It was a strange realization, but one that felt oddly freeing. For the first time in years, Billy allowed himself to think about something other than business. He thought about his family, his childhood, and the people who had come in and out of his life. He thought about Nia, and the way her presence, though virtual, had cracked through his hardened exterior. She had made him realize that even a man with everything could still be missing something important. Billy couldn't keep running from that truth, and he couldn't keep pretending that he was fine when in reality, he wasn't. The next day, he made a decision, one that felt impulsive, but one he knew was necessary. He booked a flight to the city where Nia lived. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew that he couldn't let this connection, this moment of emotional clarity, slip away. For the first time in his life, Billy was ready to face the raw, unpolished part of himself, the part that Nia had helped him see. He was ready to step away from the persona he had created and allow himself to be vulnerable, to make a real, tangible connection. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him, but for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. It was time to meet Nia, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to begin the process of healing. The glow of the early morning sunlight filtered through the curtains in Nia's room, casting soft shadows on the walls. The air felt different this morning. There was an unusual sense of calm in the space. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming as she prepared breakfast, and for once, Nia didn't feel the usual heaviness weighing down on her chest. The grief, which had been her constant companion for months, was still there, but somehow it felt more manageable now. She sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in her hand, staring at the screen as the words Billy had sent her last night ran through her mind. "You've changed something inside me, Nia. I don't know what it is, but for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. I never thought I would care for someone like I care for you. You've shown me what it means to be human again. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know I want to be a better person because of you." Nia swallowed, her heart beating faster. For a moment, she had to remind herself that this was real, that Billy, a man who had everything, was opening up to her, a girl who had just lost everything. There was a tenderness in his words that made her chest ache. It wasn't just the kindness he had shown her, but the way he had started to recognize the things she needed too, things she hadn't even realized were missing. In the time that they had been talking, Nia had slowly allowed herself to trust him. She had never felt so understood by anyone in her life. The conversations had started with her grieving, her missing her father, but they had slowly morphed into something more, something deeper, and now she realized she had done the same for Billy. Billy wasn't just the billionaire CEO who had reached out to comfort a grieving child. He was someone who had been hurt, too. Someone who had buried his emotions in success and money, just like her mother had buried her own pain to protect Nia from the weight of their loss. She could sense it now, in the way Billy spoke about the emptiness in his life, the loneliness that even his vast wealth couldn't fill. Nia tapped the screen, sending him a simple message. "You don't have to thank me, Billy. I've learned a lot from you too, I think we both needed someone to talk to. And now I know we're both going to be okay." She set the phone down beside her and walked over to her window, looking out over the street below. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful in the early hours of the day, but her mind was far from still. The reality of the bond she was forming with Billy had begun to settle in. She wasn't just helping him heal, he was helping her heal too. And that realization brought with it an understanding she hadn't had before. Human connection, real connection, was everything. It wasn't the expensive gifts her father used to give her or the nice things they had. It wasn't the well-meaning gestures her mother made to shield her from pain. It was the love and care shared between two people who, despite their differences, could see the pain in each other and choose to help. Nia's thoughts were interrupted by the familiar ping of her phone. She grabbed it quickly, her heart skipping a beat as she read Billy's new message. "I've been thinking about what you said, Nia, about the future, and I've made a decision. I'm going to start a foundation in your father's name. He helped me become who I am today, and I want to honor him. I want to help kids like you, kids who've lost their parents. It's the least I can do." Nia's breath caught in her throat. She reread the message twice, her eyes filling with tears. Billy, this man who had everything, was giving something real. He was using his wealth, his power, his influence to make a difference, and he was doing it in her father's name. This wasn't just a gesture, it was a commitment to honor a man who had helped him succeed and to give back to the community of children who had experienced the kind of loss Nia was still trying to navigate. Nia could feel the weight of the gesture in her chest. It wasn't just about the money or the foundation. It was about what Billy had said, what he had come to understand. It was about the real value of human connection, the kind of connection that transcended wealth and status. She sat down on her bed, the tears falling freely now. But these weren't tears of sadness. These were tears of relief, of gratitude. She could feel her heart beginning to mend, not just because of what Billy had done for her father's legacy, but because of what he had done for her, for both of them. He had given her something she didn't know she needed: hope. Nia wiped her eyes, her hand trembling as she typed her reply. "Billy, I don't know what to say. This means everything to me. To honor my dad like this, it's more than I could have ever imagined. I know he would be so proud. Thank you." She hesitated for a moment, then added a final thought. "I think we're both learning something important. About love, about how we connect with people, and how we heal." She hit send and sat back against her pillows, her mind swirling with a new understanding of the world around her. In the short time that she and Billy had been talking, she had learned so much about what it meant to open herself up to others. It was about vulnerability, trust, and compassion. It was about letting others in, even when it hurt. Nia stood up, walking over to the framed picture of her father on her dresser. She studied it for a moment, her heart swelling with love for the man who had been her everything. And yet, now she could feel a piece of him in every step she took, every conversation she had with Billy. The door to her room opened, and her mother stepped in, holding a tray with breakfast. She smiled at Nia, but Nia could see the tiredness in her eyes, the quiet sadness she had been carrying for so long. "Hey, kiddo," her mother said softly, setting the tray down. "You doing okay?" Nia looked up at her mother and smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. "Yeah, I am." Her mother sat down beside her on the bed, reaching over to gently smooth back Nia's hair. "I'm proud of you," she said, quietly, "for holding it together like you have. I know it's been hard." Nia nodded, her thoughts drifting to Billy, to the promise of healing, and to the new future that was slowly taking shape in front of her. "I'm proud of you too, Mom," she said, "and I think we're both going to be okay." As they sat together in the quiet, Nia realized that her relationship with Billy, strange and unexpected as it had been, had become a guiding light. Through their shared healing, she had learned that love and compassion could transcend grief, distance, and even time. And though she missed her father with all her heart, she had begun to understand something important. The legacy of love that he had left behind was something she could carry with her forever. And in doing so, she would help others, just as he had helped Billy. Nia turned to her mother, a new sense of clarity in her eyes. "I think we're ready to move forward together," she said. Her mother smiled, a slow, grateful smile as she pulled Nia into a hug. And for the first time in a long while, Nia felt a sense of peace. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the world outside Billy's penthouse office was bathed in the flickering lights of the city below. Billy leaned back in his leather chair, fingers resting on his chin as he stared out over the skyline. The glass walls of his office reflected his weary face, a man who had everything but still felt like something was missing. He had everything that money could buy: mansions, luxury cars, private jets. Yet there was a hollowness that gnawed at him every day. He had been running from this emptiness for years, focusing on expanding his empire, making deals, and stacking profits. But somewhere deep down, he had known the truth all along. His wealth had become a fortress, keeping people at arm's length and shielding him from the kind of connection that truly mattered. And now, sitting in this high-rise office alone, Billy couldn't shake the thought of Nia. A little girl who had entered his life through a simple message, but had come to mean more to him than he could explain. What began as a way to comfort a grieving child had transformed into something he hadn't expected. Something that was, quite frankly, scaring him. He picked up his phone, scrolling through the messages between them. Her words were a balm to his soul, even when they were brief. But lately, the conversations had gone deeper. They talked about loss, about pain, and about the loneliness that lingered in the corners of both of their hearts. What struck him most about Nia was her empathy. At only 11 years old, she had managed to see through his carefully crafted facade, and in doing so had unearthed feelings and desires he had long buried. Billy's thumb hovered over the keyboard as he debated what to say. He knew it was time to be honest, to truly open up. Nia had done it for him. She had let him into her heart, and now he needed to do the same. He felt a pang of vulnerability deep in his chest as he typed. Nia, I need to tell you something. Something I haven't shared with anyone. His heart raced as he pressed send. For years he had buried everything beneath his success, his wealth, his power. But now, in the presence of this young girl, he was feeling the weight of all that he had kept hidden. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Nia sat at her desk, her heart pounding as she read the message from Billy. She had felt the shift between them over the past few weeks. What had begun as an exchange of comfort had evolved into something much deeper, something that reached into both of their souls. Nia hesitated before replying. She knew that, whatever Billy was about to tell her, it was important. He had shared so much already, but this felt like something different, something raw and real. She quickly typed her response. I'm here for you, Billy. Whatever it is, you can tell me. She hit send, and immediately the waiting began. She couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. What could he possibly have to say that was so significant? As she sat there, her fingers tapping nervously on the desk, she realized that she had come to care for Billy. More than just a stranger who had reached out to her in her grief, Billy had become someone she looked forward to talking to every day. He had become more than just a mentor. He was a source of strength, a reminder that even in their pain they weren't alone. And so, she waited. Billy stared at his screen for what felt like an eternity before Nia's reply came through. His heart skipped a beat as he read her message. There was no judgment in her words, only a quiet reassurance that made him feel seen for the first time in years. He took a deep breath and began to type. Nia, for the longest time, I've been running from this emptiness inside me. I've filled my life with accomplishments, with wealth, with power, but it's all been so empty. I've never let anyone in, not really. My relationships have been shallow, business dealings, acquisitions, and meetings, but no one ever knew me, not truly. And now, here I am, telling you this because you've changed something in me. I never thought I could care for anyone outside of my family, but I care for you. More than I ever thought was possible. Billy paused, his fingers trembling as he reread his words. It was terrifying to admit these things, to confront the truth that he had been so focused on building an empire that he had lost sight of what it meant to be human. He continued typing. I don't know how to explain it, but when I talk to you, Nia, I feel like I'm alive again. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm just going through the motions. I feel connected, and I owe that to you, to your kindness, your compassion, your willingness to open up to me when I've never opened up to anyone. Billy sat back, his mind racing. He had never expected a simple exchange of messages to evolve into something so significant. He had never expected to find healing in the words of a young girl, but that was exactly what had happened. He stared at the screen, waiting for her response. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. What would she say? Would she understand? Nia read the message, her breath catching in her throat. The words Billy had shared were more than she had expected. She knew that Billy was successful, powerful even, but she had never imagined that beneath all of that, he felt so alone. She had always thought that people like him had it all, everything they could ever want or need. But now, she understood that even the richest and most powerful people in the world could feel the same emptiness she had felt. For a moment, Nia didn't know what to say. She had no experience with this kind of vulnerability. But the truth was, she understood it. She had felt it. She had felt the ache of losing her father, the the quiet hole in her chest that no one could see. And now, Billy's confession mirrored that same loneliness. She didn't want to just say the right thing. She wanted to say something real. I think I understand, Billy. I didn't realize, but I've been running too. Running from the pain of losing my dad, pretending like it doesn't hurt. But when we talk, I don't feel alone anymore. You've helped me more than you know. She paused, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. She thought for a moment about how much she had learned from him. You've shown me that it's okay to feel things, that we don't have to hide our pain to be strong, and I guess that's the most important thing I've learned from you. I don't have to carry my grief alone anymore. She hit send, her heart fluttering with the weight of the conversation. She had never shared this much with anyone, and yet here she was, telling Billy more about herself than she had ever expected to. Billy read her response, his chest tightening with emotion. In that moment, everything shifted. The walls he had spent so long building around himself were starting to crack. Naya, this girl he had never met in person, had opened up something inside him that he hadn't even known was there. He felt understood. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in his grief. Naya had shared her heart with him, just as he had done with her. In a strange way, they had found healing in each other. Billy's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time. He knew this moment was important, not just for them, but for everything that had come before it. He couldn't hide anymore. Not from himself, not from Nia. Thank you, Naya. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm a different person because of you. You've taught me that it's okay to feel, that it's okay to let others in. You've made me see what I've been missing all these years, and I'm grateful for that. For the first time, Billy didn't feel the need to be strong, to hold everything together. He could feel something deep inside him, a peace, a sense of calm that had eluded him for so long. I'm here for you, Naya. Always. As he hit send, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He was no longer a man alone in a world of his own making. He had connected, truly connected, and it was enough. The phone pinged. Nia's response arrived. I'm here for you too, Billy. I think we both found something we weren't looking for, but something we needed. And in that moment, Billy realized that he had finally found what had been missing from his life all along. The air in Billy's office had shifted over the past few months, as if it had been waiting for him to finally acknowledge the truths buried deep within. Once a cold fortress of business meetings, charts, and financial forecasts, his penthouse now felt different. The lights from the skyscrapers outside no longer gleamed with the same indifferent glow. He could see them now for what they were, reflections of something bigger than himself, something he had neglected for far too long. Billy sat at his desk, scrolling through the Foundation's first draft, a proposal that had been his idea, but one that had come to life through his conversations with Nia. It wasn't just another philanthropic project to add to his resume. No, this was something personal. Something that felt right in the pit of his stomach, in the space between his ribs where he had once tried to bury his pain. The Foundation for Children of Loss, named in honor of Nia's father, was beginning to take shape. He had decided that the money he had amassed would be used for more than just expanding his empire. It would be used to help those who had suffered the same kind of loss that had shaped both his and Nia's lives. The pain of losing someone you loved, someone who had been your anchor. Billy now knew it wasn't something that could be bought away, but maybe, just maybe, he could help ease the burden for others. Billy's mind drifted back to the first time he had heard Nia's voice, that raw, fragile note of grief that had sent a shockwave through his sterile, controlled world. It had been an unintentional gift, a voice note to a man who wasn't her father, but who had ended up playing a part in her life anyway. He had become more than a stranger on the other end of the line. He had become someone she trusted, and in turn, someone who trusted her. A gentle knock at his door snapped Billy from his thoughts. Come in, he called, his voice steady but warm, something he hadn't recognized in himself for years. The door opened, and in walked Maria, his longtime assistant and right hand. She had been with him through every high and every low. Her presence had been the constant in his professional life, and yet there was a time when Billy had taken her for granted. He had used people for what they could give him, nothing more. "How's everything going?" Maria asked, her voice laced with curiosity as she took a seat across from him. Billy gestured to the proposal on his desk. "It's coming together. Slowly but surely. I want it to be perfect. This is more than just another donation or charity event. It's something real, something that can make a difference." Maria nodded, her brow furrowing slightly. "I know you've been busy, but are you sure you're ready for something like this? You've always kept your distance from things like emotions." Billy exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, I've spent too many years building walls around myself. I thought if I had everything, wealth, power, control, I'd be happy, but I wasn't. And now, I realize that I can use all of this for something good, something that actually matters." Maria regarded him thoughtfully. "I can see it's been a transformative journey for you. This Nia girl, she's had quite an impact on you." Billy smiled softly, his eyes wandering to the framed photo of Nia that sat on his desk, a gift she had sent him after their first in-person meeting. She had insisted on it, even though he had told her he didn't need any mementos. "Yeah, you could say that," Billy replied. "She's taught me more about real human connection than I ever thought I'd learn. More than anyone else, really." He thought back to the day when he first met Nia in person. He had been unsure, nervous even. What would a little girl like her think of someone like him? A billionaire, a man of status and success, but so emotionally distant. He wasn't sure he was ready for the kind of vulnerability that was required. But when he saw her face, when he heard her laugh, it was as if the whole world slowed down, and he realized he had been living in a self-imposed cage for far too long. Nia had opened the door, and for the first time he had the courage to step out. Maria leaned forward slightly, a soft smile playing on her lips. "You know, Billy, this foundation, it's going to be more than just about giving money. It's about giving people hope, the kind of hope that you didn't think you needed until you found it." Billy's gaze lingered on Maria. He realized then how much he had taken her for granted over the years, how many people he had ignored, forgotten, or dismissed. It wasn't until Nia entered his life that he had learned to truly listen, truly see the people around him. "You're right," Billy said, his voice quieter now. "It's not just about the money. It's about the stories, the lives that we can change. That's why I'm doing this. For Nia, for her dad, and for all those children out there who are going through what she went through." The days that followed were a blur of meetings, proposals, and phone calls. Billy was determined to make the Foundation for Children of Loss a reality as soon as possible. He worked tirelessly, pouring his heart and soul into the cause, and he found that he could no longer operate from the same place of detachment. He was no longer just a businessman. He was someone who had discovered the beauty of human connection. And all the while, Nia continued to be his anchor, his guiding light. Their conversations grew deeper, their connection stronger. She had already taught him how to truly listen, how to hear the grief behind someone's words, the unspoken pain that often went unnoticed. She had learned it from her father, and now she was teaching him. On a bright Tuesday morning, a breakthrough moment came. "Have you considered making it public, Billy?" Maria asked him, as they sat in his office discussing the next steps for the foundation. Billy thought for a moment, running his fingers over the edge of his coffee cup. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Maria continued, "this foundation isn't just a business move. It's personal. People are going to want to know why you're doing this. Why now? Why after all this time? Maybe it's time to share your story." Billy looked up at her, unsure. "You think people are going to care?" She smiled softly. "They will. You're not just helping children, you're showing them what it means to heal, to be vulnerable. People need to see that even someone like you, with all the wealth and success, still has room to grow, to learn." Billy took a deep breath, considering her words. It was true. He had been hiding behind his empire for too long. It was time to show the world that there was more to him than just his title. There was a man who had learned, perhaps too late, that success wasn't measured by how much you had, but by the lives you touched along the way. Billy sat at his desk, composing the first public statement for the foundation. He could feel the weight of his decision. This was more than just a press release. It was a declaration of everything he had learned over the past few months. The statement was simple, but powerful. It read, "The Foundation for Children of Loss was created to honor the memory of a man who, without me even realizing it, shaped much of my life. Nia Banks's father was a mentor, a friend, and a guiding light. It is because of him that I am the man I am today, and it is because of Nia that I'm finally learning to give back." Billy paused after finishing the sentence, reflecting on the enormity of the moment. This wasn't just a public gesture. It was his acknowledgement that even in his wealth, he had been missing something far more valuable: a sense of purpose. As he clicked send on the email, a sense of peace washed over him. The next chapter of his life had begun, not in the boardroom or in the walls of his towering empire, but through a simple act of connection. And it had started with a little girl who, against all odds, had shown him what it meant to truly care. His phone pinged almost immediately. It was a message from Nia. "Billy, I don't know what to say. This is amazing. I'm so proud of you, but more than that, I'm glad we're doing this together. Thank you for believing in me, in my dad. Thank you for everything." Billy read the message, his heart swelling with emotion. For the first time in years, he felt whole. "No, Nia," he replied, his fingers trembling slightly as he typed. "Thank you. You saved me." And as the city lights twinkled in the distance, Billy knew that his new beginning wasn't just about what he was doing for others, it was about what Nia had done for him. She had reminded him that the greatest treasures in life were the connections we make and the legacy we leave behind. What you just listened to isn't just a story. It's a reflection of some of life's most powerful moments, the ones we never see coming, the choices we make, the consequences that follow. But most of all, how one action can echo through everything. If you felt something deep within you, something that still lingers, subscribe now. Join us for more stories that aren't just meant to be told, but lived. Because the hardest truths are often the ones we're most afraid to face.